So good afternoon, Dennis.
Good afternoon, Donald. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Can't complain.
Oh,
Won't
that's good.
complain.
You won't
Yeah,
complain. So you mean you
that's
can
it.
complain, but you won't complain.
No, I can't and I won't.
Oh, hey, that's fantastic. What a start.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to just say thank you very much for participating or chosen to participate in this, what we call the Forgotten Generations. And it's great that somebody's linked you to all this,
Yeah.
which I must hopefully try and find that person and say thank you very much to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome to the Forgotten Generations interview. And we're going to go straight into it basically and ask you about yourself. So if you'd like to tell us something about your background, going back as far as you want, where you were born and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I was born in St. Kitts in 1951, March the 18th, 1951.
That's a good year. It's the
And
same year as me,
it,
so that's a good year.
that was a good start. And like everyone else, I had a very good um experience as a youngster in St. Kitts because I was surrounded by family and a very large and loving family. So that was my earliest recollections, and I was fortunate, I believe, in that.
Mm.
Then we have what is the sort of the movement of the people, in a sense that my father, along with lots of other young men at that time, went to England to seek a better way of life for himself and his family. So at that point, I can't exactly remember how old I was when my dad left for England. I cannot remember that, to be precise. But at that time, there were the three of us, three boys. My youngest brother then was very much a baby. And then, shortly after, if you like, my mother and myself traveled to join my father. And that happened when I was 7 years of age.
So uh were you the oldest of the three?
Yes,
Ah,
I
right.
am. So the order of passage was me and my mom,
Okay.
followed later by my two brothers who joined us. But in between them joining, my first sister was born in England in
Oh,
1959. So
right.
effectively, our family is split. Three Caribbean Kittitian boys and three British English girls.
No. So
Definitely.
all the ones who were born here were girls?
Yeah.
Is
The
that
weather
amazing?
affected him.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Amazing, isn't it? It
Yeah.
is. But that's how it happened. And my father particularly always wanted a daughter.
Oh my goodness. So how long was it before your other two brother joined you? The other two brothers?
I think it was about 2 years, maximum three. I don't think it was more than 2 to 3 years.
Right. So what by the time they got here, were any of your sisters born?
Only one. Only
Okay.
one sister was born by the time they got here.
Hmm.
My sister Marie was born then,
Hmm.
and so then obviously the family grew. We moved around like people did
Yeah.
till eventually we found somewhere that was suitable and within our price range to buy, and so on.
That's
And we
great.
lived
The
there.
reason I asked the question about whether or not the others were born at the time is that straight away you give the answer in a roundabout way in that there wasn't a particular split necessarily between those who were born in the Caribbean and those who were born here. because they virtually grew up together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We were very fortunate in that respect, and I say it that way in comparison
Mm,
to what we know has happened to other families, i.e., there are families, some families that never actually reunited.
absolutely.
We know
Absolutely.
that, and that's a matter of time, circumstances, etc.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say we were fortunate in that my parents sort of went at it flat out to bring us all together, if you like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in relatively quick time, so that we didn't have a kind of a distance between us. We didn't. It wasn't
Absolutely.
as if we didn't know each other. We
Absolutely.
had our childhood together. Yeah.
Very significantly, that is
Yeah.
because I've actually interviewed other people where that's really causes a serious division on a permanent
Yeah.
basis. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I interrupted your flow there. You were saying about purchasing a place or something and moving on.
We so basically, like those periods, late 50s, early 60s, we know what Britain was. We know
Mm,
how it operated. You don't have
mm,
to sort of go over it in details, but at
no.
that time, for example, things like if you wanted to buy a house in a particular place, it might help you if you had a white friend who could go to look at the house for you. All those kinds of things existed. People think there were some stories written.
Mm,
They weren't research facts. Those were
mm.
living facts for people.
Yeah.
That it helped if you had that kind of contact. If you found an estate agent that was willing to sell you to you,
Yeah.
because in Birmingham and in and around Birmingham, we had the infamous Rolf, where estate agents were actually colluding with racism and not selling the house to black people because the residents in the road protested, etc., etc. So these things were real.
So is that where your
But
parents emigrated? Is that where you all emigrated to from St. Kitts, Birmingham?
Birmingham, yeah, we
Okay.
we we all sort of we ended up in Birmingham and we
Mhm.
stayed in Birmingham as a
Okay.
family.
Okay.
So we all grew up in Birmingham.
Mhm.
And yes, I mean, there are obviously times when you could see the issues there. My mother, my father, all of these people came here and, like so many others,
Mm,
worked in jobs well below their level of skill and education and ability.
mm,
But
mm,
most of them, I suspect, did exactly for the exact same reason as my father and mother,
mm,
to maintain their families.
mm.
And that pattern we see today. It hasn't changed. We can look at no end of migrant workers who are working at the lowest minimum wage, and they take that money and they take the dirtiest job, and they do it because they have families here or abroad to support. And we were in that boat.
Right. So looking back at your years then, you came here at age 7, which is quite young, really. So you
Mhm.
got embedded into the school system, I guess probably junior school at that time and going up to senior.
Junior,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what
I
was that
think,
sort of experience like?
well, I'll be blunt, it wasn't the best experience because prior to coming to England, I'd gone to what we would call then in St. Kitts private school, fee paying school. And it was the fee paying school on the island, Epworth. And we had, there were white children in the school, and the majority of us were black. And there were issues in terms of conflict over whose turn it is to bat, whose turn it is to bowl.
Yeah.
But in all my time in the Caribbean, as a young boy growing up, I never encountered a scenario whereby, if you want to say, because we're the majority, a black child fight, call, or curse a white child because of his whiteness.
Mm, mm,
Never. We fought because of the bat, We fought because of the football. We fought because of this, but we never did we raise that issue of race. So consequently, coming to England, having believing I've worked amongst these people, and then for a white child to actually look at me and think it's perfectly legit for him to racially abuse me in all shapes and manner, all types of manners. I didn't take kindly to that, and I wasn't the kind of person to turn the other cheek. And my view was, you don't deal with me like I deal with you. And so there used to be one of the first incidents I can clearly remember was there used to be at the end of the day in junior school, you used to put your chairs on the desk in front of you.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, so when the cleaners come in, they have a clean to sweep.
Yes.
And there was this boy all the time, constantly monkey this black down. And I mentioned to the teacher, nothing was done. And I said to him, I said, I'll tell you what, you do that today and see what happened at the end of the day. Of course, the fool didn't take the warning. And at the 4 o'clock, like that, and I put the chair instead of on the desk on his head. And I've never seen so much blood.
You put it on his head.
Yeah, in his head.
Oh gosh.
And of course, you can imagine what would have happened. So my parents, my father particularly, had to come and see the headmaster. And I remember the headmaster's name. His name was a Mr. Laban at the time. Laban. And anyway, my father explained, well, you know, Dennis has never experienced this kind of racism before, and clearly he's not prepared to accept it. And, you know, so throughout junior school, senior school, you know, race was an issue, and it was not a kind of under the carpet. It was out there. In senior school, we probably had one of the most blatantly racist headmasters that you could find in Birmingham. And he had the nerve in a confrontation to tell my father some of his black best friends are black, which just was like a Red Bull.
Really? So that was supposed to ease the situation, right?
Exactly. So, you know, I wouldn't say that school was particularly brilliant. And I think I understand it better now. I think I was never, and I have never been, and it explains my whole life. I've never been the kind of person to keep your head down and not say anything just to get on.
Right.
Wrong is wrong. If I see it, I'm going to step up. And I wasn't afraid, and it didn't bother me because I was always confident that I was capable, that I was able. I also think that my interests and the way I saw the world and the things that interested me, schools at that time, probably even now, weren't ready for me or able to cope with people like me because I was interested in the political world.
How were you?
And this is at a very, but because I come from a very, the environment that I was living in. When I lived in Birmingham, my uncles, my father, his friends, they were all involved with Pan-Africanism. They were closely linked and friends with a lot of the African students who were studying here. At one point, I was trying to learn Yoruba and so forth, from Sharif, Monty, and I can remember all these people. So I was reading, there used to be a magazine, I think it might have been called something like Africa Today. And it used to pass down. By the time the adults had finished with it, I would get it. So I would know about the sort of a whole economic plan for Ghana under Kwame Nkrumah. I understood the significance of the different coups that were orchestrated and taking place. I knew who Patrice Lumumba was, and I can say this, it's amazing. When Patrice Lumumba was killed, assassinated, every man in the group swore blind the CIA were involved. And
Really?
of course, you get a disclaimer. No, only recently they've published the involvement of the CIA.
So that was that's quite amazing then, from such a young age, how politically you got involved. Did you sort of try to take it any further, in terms of becoming a politician, or
Well,
did you?
it's funny you should say that, because not directly in the kind of in my work and stuff like that that I've done, and I was encouraged, but I've always had that view. No, when they say the system corrupts,
Mm,
and I always felt that whilst I'm happy to work with politicians,
mm.
whilst I'm happy to serve the public through political ways and means, I was never going to seek political office. And I was even encouraged by the late Bernie Grant.
All right, interesting. So what career
Yeah.
path did you take sort of immediately after school then?
Well, I didn't. I mean, essentially, I had a job in a shop.
Oh,
And I knew that it wasn't for me, it wasn't what I wanted, but it was also a means of earning some money quick and some independence. Because when you're sort of when you're like me and you believe you can market and cut your own path, and I to this day I'm proud of that, because my view has always been that we shouldn't underestimate the thinking process or the ideas that young people have. And sometimes you have to go out and forge your way. And it's that forging of the way by young people what brings us change.
absolutely.
And so I had a job in a gents outfitters, and I was one of those guys who always liked to look sharp. So it was convenient. Break away your two-piece tonic more here.
Nice.
So it was that. But then also at that point, I'd left home very young too, went to live with my cousin.
All right.
And you sort of you run in and you start to run with a different pack. But equally, that there's a line, and some of what the pack might do, you don't necessarily want to be involved with that.
Right.
And when you start to see the packs start to diminish because they go into Bardsley Green, boss, you have a choice at that point. Stay with the pack and join them in the bottle, or maybe cut out. So all those things were there. So I always knew that there's no way I'm going there. And then I don't know how it happened. I always fancied traveling. And I thought, you know what? That's what I need to do. I need to get out of England, get out of Birmingham, get some traveling in me.
So what age were you
And I
then?
thought,
What age were you at that time when you're thinking like that?
I'm into 17.
Okay.
And I thought, you know what? I had a friend and his brother had been in the Navy, and he'd come back from Singapore, and he told us all the tales of Singapore. And it appealed to me. And I thought, what? Little did I know that when he came back from Singapore, I won't call his name, that's when he deserted
No.
and never went back. Got to the point where he even used to open the door when the red cap or the naval police came and say, no, he's not here.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
my God. So he deserted,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's his story. I guess he told you why he deserted and all that sort of thing. But anyway, that's another story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So then I went off and, I thought, nah. Went up to the Navy, and I wasn't keen on it. The notion of at sea and all that nonsense didn't really appeal to me. And at the time, I met a guy there from the Marines, and I'd read a bit about them, and I thought that would be a challenge. You don't pass through the training that easily. And I thought, I could do that. And I
So,
thought,
so you met
go.
him at the courier's office when you went? This guy, this
Yeah,
Marine?
yeah. Because the Navy at that time, the Marines and the Navy used to share the same careers office on Broad
All
Street.
right. Okay. Okay.
And you walk in and you turn right and you're in the Navy, turn left and you're in the Marines kind of
Oh, I
thing.
see. Okay.
And that's how it went. So we did some, and before I knew it, I joined and got a ticket to report to Deal in Kent.
So let
On
me
the
just ask you
23rd.
then. Let me just ask you then. What did it take to join the Marine? Like, did you have to do an exam, physical, and all these sort of things as per usual, or what?
Basically, listen. Recruitment at that time was fairly straightforward. You want to join the Marine? Okay, come in. They did a pseudo medical. Basic, can you hear? Can you see? They had a look at you, and and it worked in that for them. It worked because you can see how things have changed. Young people then were possibly a little more hardy and more fit. We
And I
walked to
get that.
school,
I get that.
so
Yeah.
so they could see, what they could build on.
Mm.
Anyway, that was it. So I walked in, did a very preliminary basic test, got a train ticket sent to me to Deal, filled in some papers, signed some papers, got my mother or father to countersign them because of age, and went to Deal on the 23rd of April,
Can I
1968.
sorry, can I ask you at this point? What did you say to mother and father when you went back and say sign here? What did you say, and what were their reactions?
I said, I'm going to join the Marines. I didn't ask. I said, I'm going to join the Marines. I need a signature. And my dad was reluctant,
Okay.
but at the same time, I had a plan for alternative signatures anyway, because you could have gone to like a vicar or somebody like that.
All
You
right.
were able to get, there were the ways to do it.
Okay.
So I think after my mum must have spoken to Mrs. Well, look, you go and do it anyway, that
Mm.
kind of thing.
Mm.
And that was it. Got the signature and off I went.
Wow.
And you go to Deal, you do your training, you move up to Livingston for commando training. And I finished my full training with the Green Beret in the December of 1968.
So how long was the training?
9 months.
Wow.
And you went from day one into boots. From day one, you were into proper equipment. I don't think they do that now. But
Wow.
hey, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah.
But we so 9 months training, and then I went on leave.
Sorry. I mean, I know you say 9 months training in the Marines, right? I mean, that's no chicken feed, is it? I mean, it's not a picnic, is it? It's not a walk in the park. What was that like?
Well, the idea is basically to wither you down, isn't it? Because we went in with numbers. I think our intake numbers probably was in the region of about 35, 40. And I always remember us, we all lined up, 3 ranks, and the sergeant in charge walked along giving his spiel. and what he was going to do to us and how he was going to reduce us and this, that, and the other. And it coincided that by the time he got to me, he said, by the time I'm finished with you, this, that, and the others, there'll be only 12 of you. He said, will you be one? And I looked him in the eye and I said, yes.
Wow.
Man, so said, so done. From 42 roughly to the time we finished training, there were only 12 from the original intake.
No,
Yeah.
not even half.
No, the attrition is incredible. They, people walked after day one. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that.
And then you get the situation where there are those who walk and those who get pushed. So you've got people who are saying, well, they're saying, well, you're never going to make it. Move, go.
Right.
And
So
those were the hardest.
so how many black youngsters were there like yourself?
In
Or were
that
there
group,
any? Yeah.
I was it.
Wow.
And that time, and this is why we're searching, and at that time, during training, there were two other black people that I saw in training. One was a guy in the squad, 2 squads before me.
Mm-hmm.
He failed, he left. And one of the other guys was what we call a junior squad, a junior Marine, junior leaders.
Mm.
And he completed his training and then he left as well.
Wow. Gosh.
It
So,
was a lot.
that's very interesting because the armed forces, as you probably know, all different in terms of from day one, in
Yeah.
training, and you hear the stories about being a Marine, and that's pretty physically tough. I don't know how. I guess it's mentally tough as well, of course, but it's very physical. But to hear you say you go from 42, was it, down to 12? Wow, that's quite an attrition rate.
I think they always say to us, or they used to say to us, was that it's not the physical that you can't do, it's your mental state.
Right.
So they always believed it was that notion that you can do more than you think you can do. And if you
Right.
get the mental strength, you can do it. So when you're in training, the PT instructor would just say it's mind over matter. I don't mind, you don't matter. And it's just, that's it. And always, you remember these little ditties and you
Oh
think,
gosh,
yeah.
yeah. Amazing.
That was that. So yeah, but as I said, look, listen, training was interesting in the sense that uniquely everybody was in the same boat in that particular group.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was learning something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it only worked, which is what they foster, if you pull together as a team, as a
Yes.
group. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was good. But overall, during training, I mean, the language of race, racism, the attitude and so forth were rank. And by the time you finish training, then to be quite honest, me certainly, I asked myself, why am I here? Because it seems as if I've got more enemies inside the camp than I would have to face outside the camp.
Isn't that amazing?
It's not, it sounds like that, but this is what I experienced, and this is what I realized. And I thought, you know what? I am not surprised, because they say essentially you have the armed forces is a microcosm of society. And the problem with that is when you're sort of a ring fence and penned in, it becomes even more concentrated.
Yes, 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 yes.
So whereas in the wider society, something happens down the street, you walk away, you might never walk down that street again.
Mm, mm, mm.
In the camp, you have to go everywhere, the same places, time after time, the same people, time after time, knowing that this could happen, that has happened, and so on. So it was one of those things where I realized very quickly that nah, this ain't my game. And
Right.
by the time I'd gone to Singapore, which get me wrong, I enjoyed every minute of travel that I got through the armed forces. That was brilliant. The travel. The reasons might be different. The people that you were traveling with would be questionable and so forth. But
Mm.
the actual being able to see places, because then I was in my element. I could go off and explore those
Mm.
people, those cultures, and so on.
So
But
places
what
like where? Places like where?
well,
I mean, when did you go?
Singapore,
Right.
Malaysia, Borneo. We once you were based in Singapore, you were always going to be able to go, travel around the
Mm.
region as such,
Mm.
be it on exercise or on your holiday. You
Mm.
could do some travel. There was, there were opportunities to travel, and that was fine. Then, the commandos had a commitment in the Mediterranean, so
Right.
virtually
Right.
every
Right.
year you had the med trip 3 months of the year in the Med. You might do
Right.
2 or 3 exercises, but the rest of the time you're posing somewhere.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So from a very young age, then, still in your teens, you started traveling from in your teens. Is that right?
yeah, I went to Singapore. I went to Singapore straight after training, so I wasn't
Oh,
quite
really?
18.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Those days you didn't have to be 18 to go abroad.
No. 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 No.
This is something things obviously have changed.
Mm.
But no, I was finished training in December, off to Singapore.
Wow.
18 months in Singapore.
So you actually went to Singapore. Is that where you say your mate came from? Did you say the one that was in the Navy or something? Was it?
No, 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 no. That's where his last posted, and then he left.
Sorry, that's
It
that's what I meant.
unofficially left.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But Singapore was an interesting place at the time.
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
like the Singapore today. But Lee
yeah.
Kuan Yew was there. And it was interesting that that was the driver. And so when people sometimes he got called quite a lot of the times as a dictator and this and that.
Mm,
But colonialism is an interesting thing.
mm.
Colonialism is what it is. It keeps or seeks to keep you in your place as they see it. Lee
Yes.
Kuan Yew had a better vision, and so he got called he was called a dictator or whatever. But my view, if anything, he was a benevolent dictator, because if you look at Singapore today, anybody who knows the place will say they have made a mega leap, because Singapore was a den of iniquity.
Boogie Street and all that.
Worse.
Yeah. I heard of this
So
Boogie Street place. Yeah.
yeah, but just even the health. There used to be a place called Raw Court Canal that ran through the middle of town. It was a wide open sewer,
My goodness.
and you can't imagine in the heat. But you see, the kampongs and the different things. But this man, with his government, with vision
Mm.
and determination, took it on, and now the West look to Singapore for all kinds of guidelines on achievements.
Yeah. So how long did you spend in that region then, over there before you came
18
back?
months.
How long?
18 months in Singapore. 18
Okay.
months in Singapore. Came back and got a draft straight away to another commando unit and went off to Northern Ireland.
Really? What year was this?
That's got to be about 1970. Motorman had just taken place. Yes, 70.
Wow. And where did you go to in Northern Ireland?
oh God, no, Belfast, Black Street, yeah.
Very interesting.
And so this was an interesting place as well, because I thought to myself, that is, why are you here? Why would I be wanting to be involved in somebody's civil war? Why would I be wanting to see the IRA as a sort of as my enemy? When in effect, if you're talking about liberating your country, you're either a liberator or an enemy
Yeah.
or a terrorist, you know? And I
Mm.
was thinking all these things, and I thought to myself, this is the one trip I'm doing, and I won't be going again.
So interestingly, did you get asked that question by the local people as to why you were there?
The local people often said to you, go home, it's nothing to do with you. Local
Interesting.
people would say to you, why you don't go and help fighting where? In Africa, you know,
Mm.
and things like that. And I thought to myself, you got a point.
Mm.
And then the other bit was when the other confusion were things like when local would look at you and say, well, if he was a this or if he was a that, a Catholic or a Protestant, you wouldn't have done this, you wouldn't have. And I'm there sitting thinking, lady, how do I know one white man from another's religion? They do through the
Yeah.
names,
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
you know, and things like so. You start to learn anyway. So essentially, that was that. Did the one tour, and of course, no, being a Royal Marine, the next thing. This is where it gets messy.
Yeah.
Is that a second tour comes out, and by this
Right.
time, I'm trying desperately to get out.
So how long
Um,
was a tour? How long was the duration of a tour?
but they varied because I think they were like some of them were 3 months, some of them were longer, some were shorter,
Okay.
depending. Because you know,
Okay.
if there was a flare up,
Mm.
it wouldn't be uncommon for a commando unit to be doing 6 weeks or 2 weeks there to hold STEMI some of it till they bring in another unit.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
But essentially, they then had another draft, another tour come up, and I made it quite plain. I wasn't going to be going. And it was one of those standoffs where it's not for you to determine. I says, well, I think it is. And I'm telling you now, I'm not going. And there's
Wow.
nothing you can do to make me go. So at that point, you go down to Lid to do all the beat up trainings and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, I said, you're wasting your time. I said, because I'm not going. And it got messy. I had a letter in the Guardian with another guy where we were sort of denouncing it.
In the
And
Guardian newspaper.
yeah.
Wow.
And then of course the you know, you get called in. I got I got I got I got arrested by the SIB. Allegedly, I was a revolutionary preaching black power and this and that. And I said, listen, there's no alleging in nothing. I said, everything that you want to accuse me of, I can tell you, yes, I've done that. Yes, I am that. I said, because I went to Angela Davis, free Angela Davis campaign up in Birmingham, fundraiser. And they
Right.
said to me, but you went to the, I said, you did, I said, if you'd asked me, I'd have told you I got it. It's no secret. So all this paper that they thought they'd gathered as intelligence, if you like, to
Mm.
condemn me. I'm saying, what's your problem? Ask me and I'll tell you, yes, I'm not denying any of that. That's who I am. That's what I did. That's what I do. I had a bookstore in my room in the back, you know, incredible, what they would seem as subversive books. I went and I ordered a book on Marxism from W.H. Smith in Plymouth.
Mm.
And before I know it, W.H. Smith have actually gone back to the barracks, and I'm holding front the colonel. What's this about you ordering W.H. Smith?
No.
Right? A book on Teach Yourself Russian and a book on Marxism. And I says, well, it's no secret. That's what I've done. I'm interested because I'm thinking of applying, if I can, to go to the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow. with all this stuff I'm selling. So you could imagine that.
Wow.
So they had their files. I mean, I'm sure they said all sorts of things, and I know they did, but it didn't bother me. It did not bother me because I knew I am not staying in this. This is not for me. You're not part of me. And I think that's why I always say to people, I was in the Marines, but the Marines was never in me.
Oh, okay, I really get that now. So how long did you do in the Marines?
Well, that's the other part. I served 8 years, but it's only 7 count.
Oh, because of the
Because,
junior, the first year was
yes,
a junior.
they used to call it girls' time.
I've heard it called giving a year to the Queen or something like that, but I never heard it called it
No,
girls.
in the Marines, they used to call it girls' time.
Wow.
And essentially, so eventually, almost on the eve of or just after the unit had gone off on tour to Ireland for the second time.
So you didn't go?
I didn't go, no.
Right, okay.
And my discharge came and I left. And I went to college. And then I worked in
So sorry,
education.
I'm interrupting this flow here again because it's quite important. What happened to you because you didn't go? Was there some form of discipline or something?
No. It is I had a point of view, right?
Mm,
Which was uncomfortable for them.
mm,
I'd accused them of, the level of racism.
mm.
I told them I didn't trust any of them. Therefore, I didn't see why I would be going there with them to talk about firing live ammunition and whatever. All sorts of things were involved.
Wow.
They tried all kinds of tricks. They got me to sit down with an SD officer, an older guy who'd come through the ranks, and he wanted to know what was making me tick, and I knew what that was all about. And I said to him in no uncertain terms, I said, "This is not for me. I'm not interested." I said, "It doesn't meet or square with what I know and believe." So he was quite, the usual grey man, sort of quiet, yeah, okay. And that was that. Then I went during the sort of the first part of the tour, whilst they were away and I'm back at camp, they sent me to work with this very interesting guy, to work for him or work with him. A guy was massive, a sergeant major, yeah, WO2. And he said to me, he said, "Look," he says, "I've heard all sorts," he said. He says, "I don't know you, I've never met you," he says. "You got a clean slate with me," he said. He said, "All I want you to do is to do your work in the office, yeah? And that's it." He said, "I'm not interested in why you didn't go or why you won't go or whatever. Just do your work for me, keep my work up to date, and we're okay." I said, "Fair enough." It sounds like, he says, "Oh," he says, "I understand you don't make tea."
Wow.
I says to him, and I said to him, I says, "Yeah, but if I'm making one and I offer you one, you'll get a good cup of tea." He says, "Likewise," he said, "if I make one, I'll offer you one, you'll get a good cup." Straight as line.
Wow. Wow.
And that was it. So I then worked there for a while for him. I can't remember how long. Worked there for him to the point that at one point, Prince Charles was visiting, because he was doing some helicopter training or something,
Mm.
and allegedly he was going to be flying in and landing at the barracks. So you got all this, when the usual shit where they bring out the silver service and all that.
Yeah.
So he says to me, he says, "Look," he says, "Charles is coming in today." He says, "We got very people VIP today." He said, "Are you going to be behaving if he's around?"
Is that what he said to you?
I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you're not going to be protesting to him, are you?
Oh my
I said, I
goodness.
don't know. I said, I don't know. He said, I'll tell you what. You go into the other end of the office, he said. You work from down there, he said. I'll bring you some tea and biscuits, he said, I don't need you to piss on my parade. That was his words. I said, no problem. God, lo and behold, ask me if I go down there, where does Charlie want to go? Down to
No.
the office.
No.
So Charlie comes in and it's all, usual standard attention and whatever. He walks in, and he's out. You can see this guy's face. He's thinking, he's Osborne in a second. So obviously I did. Because after the visit, he comes in, he calls me, he says, come here, he says, sit down. And he pours me, he gives me a tea with a tot of whiskey in it. He says,
Really?
yeah. But it wasn't, overall, right? I'll be honest. Yes, you would have met one or two decent people, and it's a handful.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could call the names of 10 people, I would have called plenty. And I'm talking about 10 white people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that'd be plenty that I could say. And I don't think I could call 10 names
Wow.
that I had any particular fondness or respect for.
My goodness.
Paddy Ashdown, yeah, was at one time he was my commanding officer.
Is that
For a
right?
short period. Oh yeah. I understood how he could become a liberal Democrat because he was a very practical, straight man. He thought to appear fair,
Mm.
So you could see from that why he might have transferred into a liberal, yeah.
Mm.
I would say I respected him. I would say that. And I would say that he respected people and men in general.
Mm.
I would say that. But I couldn't find too many others to say that about.
Very interesting. Very, very
Yeah.
interesting. So at this point, right, before you come on to, I guess you left over time. Eventually, you left. Yeah, having served your time. Would you recommend any youngster to join the Marines?
Listen, I've been absolutely clear over this. Yeah, I work in a field in education in the youth service where you're always and forever required to ask to solicit the advice from young people about their futures and stuff.
Mm.
And whilst I have said to young people, guiding them in terms of school, academics, and so on, and careers, one of the things I've always said about the military, that's a decision that you make for yourself on the basis that you have to know what the bottom line commitment is.
Mm.
The bottom line commitment isn't like you see on the television. The bottom line commitment is that die or kill. And if you can handle that, anything else that happens in between might be your bonus.
Right.
So I never make any recommendations. When I have private conversations about my feeling, then that becomes a little clearer. I wouldn't do it again if that's what the line of thought is.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it.
Very
I think I think even now that they are allegedly trying to make significant changes, when I look at it and when you read the news and you realize those changes, essentially quite a lot of it is hollow.
Mm.
So for example, the whole business of upping and achieving the ethnic quota.
Mm.
Well, what they have done is taken the easy route, gone to the poorest parts of the Commonwealth, the
Right.
desperate parts of the Commonwealth, and they bring these people in, use them, and then get rid of them. So you find ex-Commonwealth soldiers injured in their wars, struggling to get treatment and stay in this country. And that's happened for years, and it continues to happen. So that notion of a commodity that we use and disregard, rather than examine the service in real time, examine its links with its own Black community, and drive to change that sort of a dialogue, so that they, Black British kids, see it as their army, their armed forces, and so forth. And I think that they have missed that.
Yeah.
And in many ways, this discourse that we're having with, or trying to have with, the Royal Marines about revealing the first, I reckon for them, you know, that's part of it. They can't get their heads around that issue of race and how fundamental it might be to so many other things. I don't think they've got that at all. I don't think they're ready for that. They make the right statements. You know, if you read any of the documents, yeah, it says this, that, and the other. And you think, okay, these documents are now more than 20 years old. So essentially, if it's more than 20 years old, you would say virtually a whole new generation, yeah, would have come through into the army under this new regime. But then when you look at the cases that are coming up every so often, the modern cases that are coming up, you're thinking, well, the charge of racism is the same as old as 68 and before.
Right. So no fundamental changes. It's more or less like a lip service, I suppose.
I think so. I think if I'm absolutely honest, I think the most significant fundamental change that the armed forces has made is in relation to gender.
Okay.
I think that's where they've actually put their hands up and started to deal with it. So the opportunities from gender. But in terms of race is simply, as long as we can put a Black face in a bear skin on any Queen's parade or any Cenotaph parade, we can have a Black person somewhere, or we can make an equerry to the Queen, a Black man, and so on and so on. But you got to ask yourself, what is the price of that? And how influential can they be? It's questionable. The change that we need to talk about is that groundswell. What is the experience for our young Black kids in the street, and their relationship and their understanding of what the military represents to them? Change that picture, get them in, you get talent in.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And we wonder, going forward, how are we going to achieve that? And more importantly, when? Because you do have Black people, very much like yourself and me when we went to school, but then nowadays, whether you're a girl or a boy, who would like a military career because they're just not naturally drawn to it for whatever reason. So what you're really saying is that they should have that equal opportunity, just like everybody else, and just see themselves as a member of the society going into something that's agreeable to them.
You know, I think you see, you're right, because one of the things that people sometimes forget, we tend to isolate things, but we live in the fastest age of communication that we've ever known. Every young person's got a mobile phone. They've got access to Wikipedia. They've got access to any information they want. They've got it at the tip of their finger. And that's propaganda, that's factual, that's whatever. Call it what, but they've got access to information. So when we're talking about issues, it's not a question of now only the expert is able to understand or comment.
Mm.
I mean, look at what happens in rap. Music tears up some of the political issues
Mm.
in such a manner that the young people digest it.
Yes, 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 because they understand that language.
It's not, so all I'm saying is that this thing here about our young people, it's how we engage with them, and it's not just a case of us winning them over. It's a case of us listening to them. It's more a case of that, to be quite honest, because if you want that, that's the commodity. And if you want their service, you now got to find out what's it going to take to get it. And they're not going to do that. So that's why we go to, the Caribbean, we go to Africa and wherever else to bring in Fiji, all these people to give us the tones that we want to show in the and I've looked at the figures where they're showing that whilst they've got the ethnic mix in some ways on the up, when they then look at you break it down, you're seeing that it's black British kids are nowhere in there. These
Absolutely.
are foreign people coming.
Absolutely, and I believe that there's a government request to have around about 11% uptake from the British youngsters into the armed forces. I'm talking about BAME. They chose to call it BAME. Yeah, I think that's a percentage that they're looking at. But even that is a tall order, 11%.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know guys who have done very well. I know guys whose children have done very well. But as I remind people, look, I don't begrudge that. I don't have a problem with that. That's the nature of the beast. But no one is ever going to convince me, that a serving army officer who is supposedly leading on the Bami, whatever you want to call it, issue, is ever going to be able to be as punchy, sharp, and direct as is necessary to get the message across. It's not going to happen. Hierarchies, before you know it, and I've seen it because I know some people who have had that experience, they get shifted.
Right.
Secondly, you're talking about the military, right? So people get drafted. So you get a job like that and you're doing it for 2 years. Well, question is, really, what do you hope to achieve in 2 years? Because guess what? You're up and gone for your draft. 2 years might have what it has taken you to build the confidences and the contacts to get people really speaking.
Yes, yes. I understand
and then
that.
they shift you on. So what the military does is it's a convenience in the sense, it's not just the military, part governments do. You have this scenario whereby we can say, well, we've got Colonel so or Sergeant so doing X.
So it's ticking a box, really, isn't it?
Really? Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask you now, what is it? I think you probably said it, but I'll ask you again. What is it you actually do now in terms of, are you actually still in employment, or are you?
Okay, right. I'm retired. I worked in education in post-16 education, managing youth services and so forth for more than 30 odd years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually, in the process, I went on and I studied and I ended up doing a master's in in anthropology,
Wow.
and
Where did that
that's
come from?
my sort. Well, it actually comes from my childhood,
Yeah.
because from a very early on, I was always fascinated and interested in people and culture and politics, and having done sort of some sociology and psychology and so forth, the anthropology sort of, in a sense, for me, pulled it all together. And I remember when I was very young, I remember listening to an anthropologist talking about some people, and I thought, that's interesting. I thought, how
Mm.
does he know that those people don't think the same thing about him? but I got into it, and I studied at in London at Goldsmith,
Mm.
and I was very fortunate. One of my tutors was a black woman by the name of Jean Besson, Jamaican woman, and the course was good, and I enjoyed it thoroughly,
Mm.
and I've just continued. In fact, I'm reading a very good 2 or 3 good books at the moment. Just keep reading in anthropology and politics and Black
Brilliant,
history and stuff like that.
brilliant, 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 brilliant. No,
Yeah,
this has
because I've
been.
got to start. Go
I was just going to say this has been fascinating because we've travelled quite a bit there, around and about, and to end up with something like anthropology, and you getting a degree and all of that. That could be even another story for another time. Digging
Well,
down.
as I said, I never ever had a doubt about my ability. I never
Mm.
did. I always say to people, I might have gone quite a roundabout route at it, to be quite honest, and I would
Mm.
never necessarily advise anybody to take such a route,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
But it's equally a valid route for me because it was about experiences.
Yes.
And when you gather those experiences and then you turn that into words, into academic thinking
Yeah,
and so forth,
yeah.
for me, it's how I enjoy learning.
Yes,
It's
yes,
how
yes.
I have been.
Yeah, it'd
But
be
yeah,
very interesting to look at the history of black people, digging into it, into the Marines, because like we've had this conversation outside of this particular interview about looking at how far back we can actually
yeah.
go to get a true record of black people in the military. That would be interesting, and I think that you're pursuing that, aren't you?
Yeah, I think what is interesting is that in historical written form, there is tremendous amount of information about blacks in the Marines going back to 17 whatever. So you've got the colonial Marines and so forth. Yes,
Mm.
these were armies raised initially when America was a colony, or when they were about to lose it to fight. And so free slaves and so forth, or runaways, were able to join the Brits and be
Mm.
part of these colonial Marines. They raised regiments in the Caribbean to help with that, and so on.
Mm.
And
Mm.
these regiments went on to fight in different um, scenarios within the British Empire. We
Mm.
also know that there's good evidence of Marines within the British Armed Forces as well in the First World War. We know of that. Where the sort of void starts to appear is in this modern period, so the Second World War.
Okay.
Because why I say that, there is allegedly, I've not seen it, but many people have told me they have seen it and that it exists. There's a picture in Stonehouse Barracks in Plymouth of a black provost, Royal Marine provost sergeant from the 30s.
Oh.
So presumably you could have been in there from, anything from 20 odd years to get to the rank of provost sergeant then. You with me? So in the 30s there was a, but in the Second World War is my question, because the Royal Marines only got their Green Beret in 1942.
Okay.
So we know that during the Second World War, many people from the Caribbean, Africa, and all the colonies for that matter, answered the call to come and serve, fight for the mother country. We also know that at that time, Britain also had a sizable, though not great, but sizable black population.
Yes.
We know that because the likes of Walter Tull,
yes,
people like them came out of those
yes,
communities.
Yes.
So we're saying that it is as likely that people could have come from the Caribbean and to join the Marines, or people bred and born here could have joined the Marines during the period of the Second World War. However, so far, the earliest person that we can find is someone who joined in 1947, which is 2 years after the war.
Interesting.
Now we, I say we, this is a group of us, former Marines, we don't believe that might be the true picture. And what the question is really is, how do we unravel it? And part of it is that I'm hoping that we're involved with the Royal Navy Royal Marines Museum in Portsmouth, and we're trying to get some access to some photos and footage and stuff like that, equally to help them and encourage them to research that. But I think in this forum, it would be great if perhaps out there is a grandchild, a son who could say, well, my dad or my granddad fought in the Second World War, was in the Royal Marines, or knew someone who was in the Royal Marines, a black person that was in the Royal Marines, and could give us some lead there. Because then, once we have detail of a name or something, or even name and number, we can then go back to the Royal Marines institutions and so forth and start to check that. Even,
that would be fantastic, because I mean, we are now dealing, as I say, with the forgotten generations, which is what this organization is called. And a lot of us have done great things, contributed to Britain. But where is it? It's hidden out there. So let's hope this will reach people out there to help us to uncover these great things that we've done. So this will go out to our members, Go on.
I think what's important is that it settles an issue. And it's one of these things that we suspect also that it might well be quite simple, but embarrassing, because we also know that the armed forces, and certainly the Navy, maintained its segregation and color bar longer than most of the other arms of the services. And there are, I can't quote them off the top, but I've got copies from the research which shows the actual letters that went from the Admiralty talking about how to appear to be easing the color bar, but essentially maintaining it. Now, it is quite possible that the Royal Marines, given that they were part of the Navy, could have been affected by that particular.
Interesting, very interesting. Listen, I'm just going to ask you, because we're coming to a close now, and thank you very much. Have you got any questions for me?
Oh, I thought Not so much questions. I thought it's great that I actually was able to make contact with you. And I think what I've seen of the site I like, and I have actually passed it on and encouraged quite a number of people to look at it. I'm also going to share it to some people within the teaching profession and the youth profession and suggest that they might see something that they could glean that might be helpful for their work and so forth. So from that point of view, brilliant. The only question is, where do you go from here with
Well,
that?
thank you very much. Yeah, where do I go from here? First start, I would like people to become members. You know,
Mhm.
yourself and anybody else that you pass it on to, so that I can keep them updated. And the fact that I'm keeping you updated and you keeping other people updated, then it spreads it and we get a network of this. Then the fact that I'm uncovering people's stories like what we've just done with yours, which I thought was tremendous because I've not interviewed anybody from the Marines before. Then we start to tell our own stories of our experiences in life. And it becomes a point there where we are then recording the forgotten contributions.
Yeah.
That is essential. What is also essential is that you talk about our website, theforgottengenerations.com. It is an educational tool, and it was designed to do that, where we can actually have anyone, especially our youngsters, access it and get a lot of information right there, like a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And you know, we have this once a year thing when we talk about Black History Month. As much as I don't have anything against that, you yourself know that Black history is every day.
Exactly.
So this website exists every day, and anybody and everybody can access it and get some information. So I would like to thank you again very, very much for all this. It's been tremendous. And I've learned from you, you know, your experience in that world, and tremendous. So
Okay. Donald, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. And we'll talk more.
Okay, man. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.